The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Big news breaking last night. Paul Manafort's plea deal with prosecutors has been voided by a judge, and this has massive implications, not just that Paul Manafort may now be spending the rest of his life in prison, which I'll get to in a second, but implications as far as the investigation at large. Let's sort of reset a little bit. Paul Manafort was Donald Trump's campaign chairman. He had made a plea deal with prosecutors. He was convicted of various financial crimes in August. In September, we learned about this plea deal for guilty charges of conspiracy and witness tampering. And the way that those deals work is you agree to cooperate with prosecutors and tell them the truth, of course. That helps them to make other cases, bigger cases, ideally. And in exchange, prosecutors give you a reduction in charges that you have to plead to and or a reduction in the sentence that is recommended to the judge in the sentencing phase. There were suspicions that Paul Manafort was lying to prosecutors and investigators even after he had made this cooperation agreement, which means he had agreed to tell the truth. And a federal judge, Amy Berman Jackson, has now decided that, yes, Paul Manafort lied multiple times, knowingly, to the FBI, to Robert Mueller's office, and to the grand jury that was involved there, lied about legal bills, lied about interactions with Russians while he was Trump's campaign chairman. And these were lies that weren't insignificant. These were what are called material lies with regard to the investigation. This is what's incredible about these circumstances. Because Manafort lied, he now loses the benefits of the plea deal, meaning the reduced sentence, but he's still bound by what he agreed to in the plea. So he can't now say, okay, I no longer get the reduced sentence, so I want to retract those guilty pleas and fight this thing. Those guilty pleas that were part of it remain. Manafort's lawyers are saying, well, he said things that weren't true, but he didn't intentionally lie. The judge disagrees, and Judge Jackson is going to be sentencing Manafort next month for 2 conspiracy counts, and then there's the sentencing for 8 counts related to a fraud case. So let's just look at the numbers. Paul Manafort turns 70 years old on April Fool's Day in a couple of months. He was going to get sentenced to 8 to 10 years based on the plea deal. With good behavior, maybe it ends up being 5 or 6, and by the time he's 76 years old, he's back out in the free world. Now he is potentially facing 30 years in prison. With good behavior, you're still looking at being more like in your late 80s or early 90s, and with Manafort's health reportedly not great, this could turn into a life sentence for Paul Manafort as a result of the lies that he told. So this isn't good for him. It's nothing to laugh at, but this is serious stuff. He does have one possible way out, and that would be a pardon from President Trump. But even there are some issues for Manafort. Number one, we haven't even started with possible state crimes that could be brought against Paul Manafort. Everything's been federal so far. And the presidential pardon power only extends to federal charges. If ultimately there are state charges, Donald Trump's not going to be able to help Paul Manafort there. But the biggest impact of this is actually on the broader probe, because when you look into what it is that Manafort lied about, one of the things Manafort continued to lie about, even after he made this plea deal, is about his contacts, his meetings with Russian intelligence officer Konstantin Kilimnik. Why would Manafort lie about that even after this deal? And the obvious speculation is because the truth of those meetings is so damning, not just to Manafort, but to so many other people in Trump's inner circle. We know that Manafort met with Russian intelligence officer Kilimnik. He knew that he was meeting with a Russian intelligence officer. The meeting was during the campaign while Manafort was Trump's campaign chairman. And when they met, they talked about a plan to split up Ukraine and to remove U.S. sanctions, both in a way that would be hugely beneficial to Russia. We also know that Manafort gave Kilimnik internal campaign data at a time when he knew that Russia was actively engaged in trying to get Donald Trump elected. And lastly, we know that Kilimnik was funneling money to the Trump campaign through a Republican operative named Sam Patton. So the implications of this are absolutely enormous. The proof is that Manafort continued to lie about it even after he made a plea deal not to lie. You only do that if something is really, really wrong with you. But Manafort has competent counsel, and it's hard to imagine they were advising him to keep lying, or because you've calculated that the risk to yourself of lying to investigators even after making the plea deal is not as great as simply telling the truth about the meetings and interactions that you had with this known Russian intelligence officer, Konstantin Kilimnik. We'll know more about Manafort's sentencing next month, and hopefully we'll soon know more about the content of his lies as well. There is a massive revelation coming up this weekend in a 60 Minutes interview. The interview is with former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. Andrew McCabe, in the 60 Minutes interview, admits that, number one, he ordered the start of an obstruction of justice investigation into Donald Trump after he fired James Comey. He admits that, yes, it was true that the Justice Department was considering looking at putting together a 25th Amendment removal of Donald Trump on the basis of being unfit or unable to serve. And yes, Andrew McCabe admits during this interview, we only have a part of this interview, the full interview will air over the weekend. McCabe admits that when Rod Rosenstein said maybe I should wear a wire when I meet with Donald Trump, it was not sarcasm. It was seriously being considered. This is so huge in that it answers, number one, the question of exactly when and for what reason did an obstruction of justice probe start into Donald Trump. And McCabe lays it out pretty clearly in this clip that we're going to take a look at. He did it in order to make it difficult to make it go away after Andrew McCabe was gone. He wanted to establish an investigation in a way that was documented, clear, and above board to make it tougher to erase the presence of that investigation after McCabe was no longer in that position of power. Here's just a segment of this interview with Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes, which will air in full over the weekend.
I was speaking to the man who had just run for the presidency and won the election for the presidency, and who might have done so with the aid of the government of Russia, our most formidable adversary on the world stage. And that was something that troubled me greatly.
How long was it after that you decided to start the obstruction of justice and counterintelligence investigations involving the president?
I think the next day I met with the team investigating the Russia cases, and I asked the team to go back and conduct an assessment to determine where are we with these efforts and what steps do we need to take going forward. I was very concerned that I was able to put the Russia case on absolutely solid ground in an indelible fashion, that were I removed quickly or reassigned or fired, that the case could not be closed or vanish in the night without a trace. I wanted to make sure that our case was on solid ground, and if somebody came in behind me and closed it and tried to walk away from it, they would not be able to do that without creating a record of why they'd made that decision.
You wanted a documentary record.
That's right.
That those investigations had begun because you feared that they would be made to go away.
That's exactly right.
This is absolutely monstrous. Now let's talk about, so that's the clip we have. In the full interview, from how it's been described so far, Scott Pelley asks McCabe about the claim that Rod Rosenstein was thinking about wearing a wire, a recording device, when he would meet with the president. That was written off as a sarcastic comment when it was first revealed months ago. Andrew McCabe reportedly says in this interview, it was not sarcastic. We were seriously thinking, it was really being considered whether Rod Rosenstein should wear a wire when he speaks to the president, given what had taken place with Jim Comey. Also in this interview, you might remember that there was a report that claimed that there were discussions involving Rosenstein about getting the cabinet together to remove Donald Trump on the basis of the 25th Amendment. That was also called fake news at the time. From the descriptions we have so far, Pat, Andrew McCabe also confirms that in this 60 Minutes interview. It is stunning, not only because it is multiple stories previously called fake news that we have more corroboration for, but the fact that these things were happening is what is most stunning.
Yeah, and this happened nearly 2 years ago at this point. It's not like since then Trump has become more sane or that it's more of a stretch to say that he should be removed from office via the 25th Amendment. It's just that now he has cronies surrounding him instead of people like James Comey and McCabe and Rosenstein who are more independent. Now he has people like Christopher Wray and Gina Haspel and Matthew Whitaker, so he's more protected now. I don't think he has. I don't think he stands a shot at being removed from office in that way anymore.
And Andrew McCabe very quickly becoming enemy number one. Donald Trump taking to Twitter this morning, flipping out right away and starting to tweet about this, saying, quote, "Disgraced FBI acting director Andrew McCabe pretends to be a poor little angel when in fact he was a big part of the crooked Hillary scandal and the Russia hoax. A puppet for leaking James Comey IG report on McCabe was devastating, part of insurance policy in case I won. Many of the top FBI brass were fired, forced to leave, or left. McCabe's wife received big dollars from Clinton people for her campaign. He gave Hillary a pass. McCabe is a disgrace to the FBI and a disgrace to our country. Make America yet again." And of course, that is what we know of as a Gish Gallop, throwing all sorts of nonsense at the wall, unrelated, overlapping, and conflicting claims that are also non sequiturs and in no way related to the question at hand. Did Rod Rosenstein think about wearing a wire to talk to Trump? Was there a discussion about removing Trump via the 25th Amendment? And of course, what is the actual reasoning behind opening up an obstruction investigation into Donald Trump? Stunning, stunning. And I can't wait to see the full interview on Sunday evening. Follow me on Twitter at @DPakman. We'll take a quick break and be back with more of today's news after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Peter Leon Bruno. Peter, thank you for being a member. Really appreciate your support. January was an incredible month for new members. February is not as good, but still going pretty well. And Peter is one of the great folks who has signed up at www.joinpakman.com. Somebody who's been with us for years is Dan Langdon. He's today's Hall of Fame, longtime sustaining member of the day, with us almost 5 years now. Peter and Dan, thank you. Join them. Save 40% using the coupon code THISIS2020. If you like this show, membership gives you access to the bonus show, which is every single day. It's an additional show just for our subscribers. Check it out at www.joinpakman.com. Okay, some interesting posts that appeared on the David Pakman Show subreddit, which is quickly hurtling towards 10,000 participants at davidpakman.com/Reddit. It is a place to hang out and talk about politics with other viewers. davidpakman.com/Reddit. Noticed a very interesting post. This has sort of come up before. Question to Pakman and other Zen lefties. Am I a Zen lefty? I don't know. How do you keep your cool? When I see clearly racist people getting away with it, I get angry. When I see policy based on ignorance championed, I get depressed, and so on. How do you disconnect and stop it affecting your emotions and ultimately your life outlook with negativity? Two things. One is more sad than advice, really. One thing that keeps me calm is that I'm very desensitized to political insanity because I've been doing the show for so long. I realize when I'm talking to other people and it comes up that, as for example, we're talking about later today, a Republican said he would drown his kids if they were gay. That's horrible and stunning and absolutely ridiculous that anybody would say that. But I notice that I don't react in the same visceral way that people who don't follow this stuff all the time do. So part of my, quote, Zen leftyism and not being bothered by stuff is that I'm desensitized to it because I've been doing this for so long. I don't think that's good. The other thing that I do think anybody can do and is good is you've got to have set times to sort of detox from news and politics. For me, it's mostly the weekends. I don't do, from the time we're done with the Friday show until I start prepping the Monday show, typically later Sunday, I not only don't do politically related writing for the show, I try to not even watch politics. And my mom will say, did you see what happened with such and such? And I'll say, Mom, I didn't, because I'm not doing the show right now. And I'm deliberately sort of detoxing from that. So I think that's another really important thing to do to kind of keep perspective and remain a little more zen to the extent that it's possible, given how crazy things actually are. Also from the David Pakman Show subreddit, a viewer pointing out that Donald Trump already has a propaganda news show. A lot of people don't realize this, but one of the Trump sons' wives, I think this is Eric Trump's wife, maybe. Is this Lara Trump?
Lara Trump, Eric Trump's wife.
This is Lara Trump. Lara Trump hosts some kind of a, I don't know what the name of it is, but it's like a Trump TV thing, Trump Pence Television, and she does something called a Real News Update, and it is total propaganda, and it exists. So for people who are unsure what a Trump state-sponsored propaganda network would look like, it would look a lot like what Lara Trump is already doing for them. And I sort of encourage you to check it out just to know that it's going on. But at the same time, don't watch too much of it because it is complete and utter garbage. But thanks for pointing it out in any case. Join the discussion at davidpakman.com/Reddit, the subreddit growing very, very quickly. One of the biggest progressive media subreddits around, much bigger than the subreddits of other progressive shows, and some pretty good conversation happening there on a daily basis. Okay, we've been talking about Trump tax reform. Are they tax cuts? All of the Trumpists who are tweeting because they're angry that their tax refunds went down, and the fact that some of them are paying more taxes, but that many others don't realize that just because you get a smaller refund doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually paying more tax. That got us to a conversation on Trump's favorite Fox News show, Fox and Friends, yesterday, where they are just running PR interference for Donald Trump at this point. And this topic came up on Fox and Friends about all sorts of taxpayers, but Trumpists included, who have been complaining that their tax refunds are tiny or they owe money this time as a result of Donald Trump's tax reform plan. And what they did was, of course, the egalitarian populist thing, which was to blame the taxpayers for being too stupid to not adjust their withholdings at their job to account for the new tax rates. Now, this is completely disingenuous. I'm going to play the clip for you in a second. This is totally disingenuous because when the new tax plan rolled out, it wasn't simply left up to employees and employers to come up with new withholdings brackets, withholdings tables. The Trump administration published new withholding tables. Our payroll company, for example, at the David Pakman Show called me and said, hey, we are putting in place the new withholding tables next pay run. Do you want to change them? And I said, no, just whatever the standard is, we want to do the standard. Democrats warned when this happened, be careful, because the Trump administration is putting out new withholding tables that will get people more money on a paycheck-to-paycheck basis. They're going to think that this is their tax cut, but in reality, it's going to affect their refund at the end of the year. Be careful about that $40 boost to your paycheck, because that might end up being $1,000 you lose from your refund at the end of the year. Didn't matter. And now we get to Fox and Friends yesterday telling Americans it's their fault and laughing about it.
Well, taxpayers are complaining as the average tax refund drops an average 8% from last year. But are you actually making less money?
Here to break it all down for you and what it means for your wallet, Charles Payne, host of Making Money with Charles Payne on the Fox Business Network. So, Charles, you know, people look forward to their tax refund and getting back the money that they overpaid to the federal government.
Exactly. You know, here's the thing is, for the most part, the IRS is telling everyone that they just simply did not make the proper adjustments on their withholdings at the beginning of the year. So they've been making all of this money.
It's an IRS mistake.
Well, it's not necessarily their mistake.
Employer.
It's your employer or you. IRS actually put a lot of memos out. They even made it pretty easy to go on their website and figure it out. This is at the beginning of last year. Of course, most people didn't do that. So while people were obviously seeing fatter paychecks, they were still counting on that refund that they always got, which is interesting because you kind of hinted at it, that we would allow, the IRS to have like a $2,000 loan, our money, right? Hold on to it. Yeah, because we overpay. So people probably should consider making these adjustments anyway, unless you want to give the IRS $2 or $3 grand of your money to hold for a year. Maybe they can make the interest on it and you won't. But
the entire sort of condescending attitude is just toxic. Yeah. How, anybody could have just gone to the IRS website and then looked at memos about withholding tables and tax rates and then contacted HR at their employer and made the change. How did not everybody do that? What are these people, stupid? So first of all, it's not Americans' job to assume that when a new tax plan rolls out, there are also withholding changes that are meant to be deceptive for political reasons. Okay, maybe we should be more skeptical. With Trump, we probably should have been more skeptical that, wait a second, maybe the withholding changes are meant to make me think I've just gotten a tax cut. And in reality, this is just money coming out of my refund. But the truth about the program of tax cuts or tax change is that the bottom 20% of earners in the country, like the bottom quintile, as we call it, they're on average paying $60 less in taxes per year, actual tax due, okay? Not withholdings versus refund. The bottom quintile is saving $60 a year. On average, some people are paying a little more, some people are saving more. $60 is the average. The next 20%, the sort of fourth quintile down from the top, is getting an average cut of $380. Some people are paying a little more, some people are paying a little less, but the average cut is $380. The top 0.1% is saving an average of $190,000 on their taxes as a result of Donald Trump's tax plan. So what I always go back to, Pat, is that, yes, it's important to understand the difference between a refund and tax due. Just because you get a smaller refund doesn't tell you for sure if you actually paid a higher or lower effective tax rate. But what we are all forgetting about when we see segments like this and segments about people who are living paycheck to paycheck, as so many are, is that whether you pay $60 more or $60 less or $380 more or $380 less, which makes a difference, but it's not a huge difference in lifestyle, there are people who have permanent tax cuts, the likes of which are saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. That's not what the people who put this plan in place want anybody talking about.
Yeah, and that's why this Trump tax plan had an approval rating of about 30 to 40%, which is surprising given that you would think intuitively that Americans would want a tax cut, that they would be in support of it. I think that they now realize that this was really just a tax cut for the top 1%, the top 0.1%, and they got scraps, they got peanuts.
Yep, and we will see if it has any impact when it comes to voting. We may not. There is such cognitive dissonance and continued ignorance. And, think about all of the issues here that are confusing to people. Number one, this confusion I mentioned between tax paid and your refund. If you make 50 grand a year and you pay 10 grand in taxes, that's a 20% tax rate. If you have 12,000 withheld during the year and get a $2,000 refund, or have 9,000 withheld during the year and cut a check for $1,000. Either way, you paid $10,000 in tax on $50,000 in earnings. A lot of people don't get that. That's confusion number one. Number two, a lot of people aren't understanding the SALT limit, the state and local taxes limit, which is now $10,000 a year. If you are in a situation where you pay $5,000 in real estate taxes and $7,000 in state income taxes, that's $12,000. Under the new tax law, only $10,000 of those $12,000 are deductible. So if you're in a higher tax state or a state with higher property values, you are going to pay more as a result of the limit on the SALT deduction. And these are just a couple of examples. The real question is, how do we break through to give people the full story about what is actually happening with their tax rate, their effective tax rate, when you have the Trump administration running total disinformation propaganda campaigns and messing with withholdings to make it seem like people are getting extra money back. And you have Fox News and others sort of supporting that propaganda disinformation campaign for the Trump administration. It is really difficult to just explain these simple things. And it may lead to what we've been predicting for a long time. Despite Trump policy being bad for most of his supporters, they will vote for him again in 2020. And that's why we need to vote, and we need to play the turnout game, convincing the Trumpists to change their vote, because Trump lied about their tax cut is simply not going to work. Let's take a quick break. I posted a behind-the-scenes picture to my Instagram today at david.pakman. Check that out. We will take a break and be back after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Okay, so we had a really great interview scheduled for you for today, and then something that happens every few months happened, which is because of a last-minute shakeup, that interview had to be rescheduled, and that's unfortunate. But the good and bad news of it is that I'm going to take just a few phone calls at 617-830-4750. If you dislike phone calls, don't worry, because this will be a very short phone call segment. If you are one of the people who last night on my live stream on YouTube, the dozens of people who couldn't get on but wanted to, here's another opportunity. Okay, so let's see what's on people's minds at 617-830-4750. We'll start with our caller from the 412 area code. Caller from 412. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yes, it is.
Hi, I'm Zach. I'm from the Pittsburgh suburbs.
Hey, Zach.
So I recently became a voting age last year, and while I did vote in the midterms, I was wondering, is there any way I could become more politically active?
Yeah, so in between elections, you should be talking to people about how important it is that they vote. So at a micro level, like if education is really important to you, become an activist for education reform. If the environment is really important to you, get involved in climate-related activism. But half the country doesn't vote, Zach. So the most impactful thing that you can do is just get more people to vote. Because as Bill Scher and I spoke about on the program yesterday, when half the country doesn't vote, the biggest opportunity to affect change is to find people who already agree with you and just get them to vote, and you can have a major impact that way.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for calling in. Appreciate it. Great to hear from new young voters, especially in Pennsylvania, which is an important state politically. Let's go, as are all states, of course. Let's go next to our caller from the 415 area code. What's 415? Is that San Francisco?
Yeah, that is San Francisco. I'm also a first-time voter, and I'm going to be voting in the 2020 primaries.
Great.
And so I kind of had a question about the candidates and authenticity. I was just wondering, because we've seen like some gaffes, I guess you could call it, or questions, whether it's Elizabeth Warren awkwardly drinking beer or Kamala Harris like misnaming the music she listened to in college, or like Cory Booker making up a fake drug dealer. I was just wondering if that's something that the candidates.
Okay, you're breaking up. You're breaking up. What we heard is you're wondering if that's something that what?
If it's something that's important to you in a candidate, is authenticity.
Is it important to me? Yes. Listen, authenticity is important. All else being equal, I would rather a candidate where I believe that the public persona somewhat closely matches who that person really is. Is that ever the case? No. I mean, I try to be as authentic as possible on the David Pakman Show. Am I my 100% authentic self on the show? No. It's a slightly... there's some deviation from that, right? So I think, number one, we should have reasonable expectations. When people are running for president on a national stage, is it reasonable to imagine that they are going to be the exact same way that they are in their living room with their family? No, that's not reasonable. But what we should be paying attention to is is the platform that they are espousing a platform that they actually believe in? Because if not, if they've ended up with a particular platform and set of policy positions because of either how polling is pointing or because of corporate interests or whatever, as quickly as they got into that platform, they could get out of it for equally poor reasons. So to that extent, authenticity is important. If someone is for Medicare for all, it's more important, I prefer that they be for it because they believe in it rather than because they think it's the right thing to say for the 2020 primary, if that makes sense. Is something like awkwardly drinking beer or whatever going to change my opinion about a candidate as president? No, it's not, but I am going to consider how that might impact voters. How is that going to make them a target for Donald Trump conceivably or something like that?
Right. I totally agree. But I find that especially on the left, it's always been about just pushing politicians to a position that's closer to ours. And I think that, we should let politicians change positions, and that's the nature of politics, and just pressuring them into our direction. Right?
Yeah, well, now you're into just the idea of is changing one's view on something objectively bad? And of course, the answer is no. We want the views to change, though, because they're better informed, not because some lobbying group said, hey, we're going to cut the money unless you change your mind.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yep. All right. Very good.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for the call. Great to hear from people in the Bay Area, of course. Let's go next to our caller from the 562 area code. Who's there from 562?
Hello?
Yeah, that's you. What's your name?
Oh, hey, David. Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Okay, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, yeah, my name is Jose Arevalo. I'm calling from Long Beach, California.
Oh, cool. Love Long Beach.
All right, so let's say if Bernie were to run for president, in terms of like a percentage, what do you think his chances are of winning?
Of winning the primary or of winning the entire thing?
The entire thing.
Well, I mean, listen, if there's 10 candidates, then from a merely mathematical perspective, there's a 10% chance Bernie wins the primary and then a 50% chance Bernie wins the election, which makes it a 5% chance, right? I mean, that's strictly speaking from like a mathematical perspective. So I think that we have to sort of, it's much more complicated to really think about it. Well, question one, when does Bernie announce? The longer he waits, I think the more problematic it is for him. Number two, what's the role of the DNC within the primary this year? To what degree are they going to put their finger on the scales? Does Bernie even win the primary? If he doesn't, that's going to drastically reduce his chance of winning. So I don't know, but I think your more general question, correct me if I'm wrong, is just how do I assess Bernie's chances if he gets into this race?
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm just wondering because, of his previous campaign, he kind of like gained a lot of popularity. So I'm just wondering like if his chances are like bigger than they were before.
I think that at this point, the advantage Bernie would have compared to 2016 if he runs is that he is far more recognizable. He has far more policy ideas out there that people generally like. And I think that he would have immediate front runner status. I'm not saying the number one front runner, but he would immediately be in the top tier as opposed to last time where he had to spend months just getting corporate media to pay attention to him. So I do think he'd be better positioned than in 2016.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Dave. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for calling from Long Beach. Love Long Beach. Okay, let's go to our caller from the 812 area code. Who's there from 812?
Hello?
Yeah, that's you. Who's this?
It's Austin from Indiana.
Okay, what's going on today?
I was just wondering, what do you think about Venezuela? And do you think we're going to do a regime change war for resources again?
I hope not. I mean, I think that Maduro's got to go, but I don't want the U.S. to get involved. And when we get involved, it's a disaster. Historically, it's a disaster. I think that the idea of there's a very kind of simplistic meme floating around of we're going to go to war to take their oil. If you look into the last 10 years of the relationship between Venezuela and remember, the oil in Venezuela mostly controlled by the Venezuelan military, which is a little bit of a different thing than you have in a lot of countries. The relationship between Venezuelan oil and American oil companies is one that has been pretty good for American oil companies. So the idea that the oil companies right now are aching to go and invade Venezuela, which in the short term could actually disrupt the status quo that they have and mostly like. I think that that's not an accurate approach. Bolton might say we want to go and take their oil, but that doesn't mean all the oil companies are on board. But I don't want the U.S. to get involved. I'm from Argentina, and I know firsthand about all of the ways in which American military involvement in Latin America has been disastrous. But Maduro's an authoritarian strongman and anti-democratic. I'm against that. So I want him to go, but I don't want U.S. involvement.
Well, right.
Cool.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk to you later. Let's go next to our caller from the 707 area code. Who's calling from 707 today?
Hey, David. This is Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Here in the Northern California, up above San Francisco.
Cool.
I just saw an article somebody posted from votesmart.org that claimed that AOC accepted $6,000 or more from Apple as a corporate donation, and she claims she doesn't accept them. Is there a way you can fact check that for me?
I mean, I can try. This is the first I've heard of it. My guess is by the time this call gets posted to our YouTube channel, it will have been fact checked. So the argument is not individual donations from people working at Apple, but that she received a corporate donation. You're sure about that? I mean, I'm just going by what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just going by votesmart.org. If you look up AOC on there, it's got all of her donations that she's accepted.
All right, let me see if I can pull it up. Votesmart.org. Let's see what we've got here. Helps provide. I mean, listen, I've never heard of this website. I don't know what it is.
Right, me neither. And when I Googled it and I tried to fact check it, there was really nothing negative that came up about it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I can look up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but the website says not found. Listen, I guess I'm not going to be able to do it right now, but I think soon we will find out whether that's true or not, and then we can compare it to what she claims about corporate donations. But this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking my call, David.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for calling in. Let's check in with our caller from the 317 area code. Who's there from 317 today?
Hey, David. This is me?
Yes, it is. Who's this?
Hi, this is also David. Good name to have.
Great. What's on your mind today?
My question revolves around Ocasio-Cortez. I'm a fan of her, largely, very much so, and a fan of the show. But I'm just curious your thoughts on how the media just is consistently digging into her on just kind of minutia of what she's talking about. I feel like as a freshman congresswoman, she's kind of suffering a little bit from just the naivety or just her the newness of her being a congresswoman, and kind of has not detailed her proposals as well as she could have, or maybe has worded the Green New Deal with things the conservatives are hopping on, arts, getting rid of that and stuff like that. I just was curious your thoughts on that coverage.
So you're saying you feel, you kind of said two different things there. You said that she's getting unfairly criticized for minutia, but at the same time that she is sort of naive in how she's handling herself. So who's the one that's making the mistake in your mind? Or is it simply sort of, this is just the circumstance in which we find ourselves?
I think it's more the circumstance, I think. She of course, as a freshman congresswoman, she has some things to learn about being in the political system, because as much as we would like, a system outside of influences from corporate institutions and that sort of stuff, that's not what we find ourselves in right now. But she also, I very much push for climate change type policy and that sort of thing. And I feel like her proposals are good, but it's just the wording that becomes difficult. You know what I'm saying?
Here's basically how it works. People are scrutinized in proportion to the degree to the degree that they are notable. And so, for example, where Nancy Pelosi was traveling during the shutdown received way more scrutiny than where, the California 20-something district unknown member of Congress was traveling during the shutdown. Does that mean that anyone's particular travel is more or less good, bad, or whatever? No, it's just Nancy Pelosi was more front and center regarding the shutdown, so her travel, how dare she go to Hawaii or Afghanistan or wherever. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is sort of suffering from a double-edged sword, which is that She has significant notability because of the way in which she knocked off an establishment Democrat in her primary and has gotten lots of interviews and so on and so forth. But she doesn't yet have, because she's brand new, all of the sort of finesse and sophistication when it comes to talking about a lot of these issues. So she's sort of a victim of circumstance. She has the positive that she's gotten a lot of attention. She just wasn't exactly ready for that degree of attention. So she said some sort of naive and less than perfectly thought out things. I think that's basically what's going on. Are there people on the right who are sort of like disproportionately fixated with her as opposed to others because of the views that she has? Of course, Fox News has become obsessed with her. Hannity's tweeting about her, all that stuff. But big picture, this is to be expected.
Oh, yeah. No, I totally agree. And especially with Fox News not quite equate or trying to equate social democracy with democratic socialism.
Of course. No surprise there. All right. Thank you for the call. Really appreciate hearing from you. Please call in again. That is all the time I have today. I said it would be just brief phone calls. Quick break. Back with more right after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I have a story for you today of just good old-fashioned extremist homophobia, and it's about West Virginia Republican Eric Porterfield. Eric Porterfield says that he would drown his children if they turned out to be gay, but you've got to know how to understand the language that he's using. During this interview on WVVA, I will tell you that he wore the requisite MAGA hat during the interview. He called LGBT people a modern-day KKK, which is sort of weird since he seems like a guy that would like the KKK, but he seems to be saying the KKK is bad because LGBT people are like the KKK. Anyway, I'm going to play the clip for you, but we're going to do audio only, and I apologize for that. The reason is that the video is from a local news station, and as I've mentioned before, local news stations are really litigious with copyright claims. Even though I believe we are using their clips as under fair use, we are doing an analysis of what the content is. They immediately slap us with copyright strikes and our YouTube channel gets all messed up. So we're going to just play audio for you. You can find the video online if you want it. Listen, and then he's going to use the code "I would see if they can swim" for drowning. And notice how quickly the interviewer simply says okay and moves on to the next thing. I would like to see her actually question the guy and say, "Are you saying you would drown your children if they were gay?" She doesn't, but that's what he's saying.
Ask you this.
Yes, ma'am.
You have a adorable daughter and a precious son. What would happen if a few years from now, when they're teens, young adults, they came to you and said that they think that they might be gay or lesbian?
Well, I will address my daughter first, as I would take her for a pedicure, take her to get her nails done, and see if she could swim. If it was my son, I would probably take him hunting, I would take him fishing, and I'd see if he could swim.
What do you mean you would see if they could swim?
I just want to make sure they could swim.
What do you mean by that?
That's it. I mean, I'd take them out to do activities.
Okay. So there have been...
Yeah, so this guy's a piece of work, but before we get to that, there was an opportunity here for the interviewer to go viral, okay? If the interviewer responds directly with, "When you say, see if they can swim, do you mean drown your children because they're gay?" And that would have been that would have been instantly viral as hero news reporter, at least among sensible people. The right would have called for her firing. So let's talk more about this guy. Last week during a floor debate at the West Virginia legislature, there was a discussion about a bill which would ban the protection of LGBT people with anti-discrimination laws. Eric Porterfield actually used the word fag during the debate, okay, during the floor debate about banning anti-discrimination laws. The position that he is sort of assembling from his different political points of view is that abortions are bad, but drowning your kids because they're gay is apparently not so bad in the completely deranged world of Eric Porterfield. This is why the left can't compromise with some elements of the right. People like John McCain, you can compromise with. You can find common ground. Do we agree on foreign policy? Do we agree on all social issues? Of course we don't. But he's a normal person that you can actually compromise with on some issues. How do you compromise with a guy like this, Pat? He shouldn't even be allowed near children, never mind being in a position to make political decisions. And this is why I think that there is an element of the right that the idea of bipartisanship might make sense, but you cannot do anything with a person like this.
Yeah, this guy needs to go. He should not be an elected official. Whatever happened to loving the sinner but hating the sin? I don't know. And especially it's even crazier because these are his actual kids, right? These are people who he presumably knows and loves. And he was willing to throw them in the water and see if they can swim if he finds out that they're gay. Come on.
Yeah, and oftentimes you will see that the one thing that gets people on the right to reconsider their completely hateful views is when you give them a scenario that says, well, hold on, what if your child or your sister or whatever? And with some conservatives, as horrible as it is, once they imagine themselves suffering from something, they can sometimes say, you know what, maybe I do need to revisit my view. And it's depressing that that's what it takes. But with some of them, it does take that. And at least that changes their perspective. With this guy, it's about his kids, and it still didn't even work. And this gets me back to thinking about the importance of local races in politics, because this is a guy in the West Virginia legislature. And I know that if you live in Boston or New York or in the country in Wyoming, this guy's decisions don't impact you. But the right's understanding of the importance of getting people that are aligned with them in lower positions of power all over the country has worked really well, and the left needs to be building their farm team. Not that this guy, I mean, listen, Trump's president, so who can say, but not that this guy's ever going to be president, but the importance of politics at the local level should not be forgotten, and this guy should be a reminder of that to all of us. We have finally figured out what Donald Trump is doing during some of that executive time, which makes up 60% of more of his time during some weeks, because we learned that a room-sized golf simulator has been installed at the White House. A big deal is being made in the media. I want to think with you about how big of a deal should be made about this in terms of criticizing Donald Trump. And in order to do that, we have to understand what's going on. First, remember that Donald Trump said he was going to be too busy to take vacation back during the campaign. The reality is that he's taken more golf trips per month than any previous president at all during his presidency so far. We now find out that despite the record number of golf trips per month at a record cost to taxpayers, even when he's at the White House, he might be playing golf on the golf simulator that he had installed. Now, some people are already saying, who cares? There's a movie theater at the White House. What's the big deal with having a golf simulator? That's no big deal. Others will say, David, Obama also had a golf simulator at the White House. It was just a cheap one. Trump's is more expensive, but he paid for it himself, reportedly $50,000 out of his own pocket. So who really cares about that? But what those defenses miss are the real problems here. The real problem that Donald Trump is almost never working, whereas President Obama, if anything, worked too much, as we found out from looking at his schedules. We now find out that on top of all of the non-work that Trump is doing, he puts in a new golf simulator. The other problem is that Trump is taking a record number of golf trips at record taxpayer expense, 139 trips so far, mostly at his own golf clubs, which funnels more money back to himself. And that's still not enough golf. He needs a new golf simulator. And the White House is defending this by saying he hasn't even used this thing during executive time, and he hasn't even used it at all since it was put in. Whether we believe that, I'm not so sure. The golf simulator, though, explains so much of what is taking place at the White House, because executive time, nothing getting done, golf outside the White House, this is sort of completing the picture in addition to the leaked schedules as to what exactly it is that Trump is spending time doing. Now, I tried to come up with some kind of silver lining here, and one I thought of is if Trump is playing golf simulator, he's not watching Fox News, which gets him to send really destructive tweets. But even that is probably wrong. I would assume that there's a television with Fox News on it inside the golf simulator room. So that probably is not an upside. Maybe the only upside, Pat, is what we've been saying for months, which is anytime Trump isn't working, it's good in the sense that when Trump, quote, works, he's either passing or promoting bad policy or ruining relationships with allies. Maybe that's the upside to the golf simulator.
Yeah, but then when you consider Trump not working means that Mike Pence is taking over or people in his cabinet are taking over, maybe that's not such a good thing. Maybe we want Trump in there instead.
Maybe not, yeah. I mean, I think the real issue is that Trump has been pretending to be too busy to do anything other than work forever. But in reality, it's recreation, it's real golf, it's golf simulator, it's watching TV, it's executive time. And the picture that we've been able to put together is one of a guy who is incipiently lazy and barely getting anything done. I actually don't care about the golf simulator in practice. The problem is we know most of his time is recreational and doing nothing. And the bottom line is that the golf simulator is only one piece of the problem. And it's actually sort of a small piece of the problem, given how lazy and ineffective Donald Trump is. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Take a listen to this voicemail question about a logical fallacy.
Hey, David. So I was in my American government class the other day, and we were talking about different logical fallacies, and he mentioned one called the appeal to authority fallacy. And an example he stated is in the climate change debate, where people say, oh, the science is settled, and he's saying that is sort of a logical fallacy. I think his point was you need to have statistics and evidence ready to go to back up your argument. But I was just wondering what your thoughts on that were, and I was wondering if you would do a logical fallacy video about it, maybe, in the miniseries.
Yeah.
Anyway, have a good day. Thanks.
We've already actually dealt with this. We've dealt with appeal to authority. So appeal to authority is a logical fallacy in which someone points to the truth of a conclusion from an argument on the basis of the authority of the person making it. So, for example, it would be, I don't know, fire is hot because a fireman said so. The fireman saying it doesn't prove that the fire is hot. So in that sense, it's a logical fallacy, but appeal to authority is a little bit more complicated. Let's see if we can think it through. We shouldn't believe that climate change is real merely because those who have the title climate scientists say it's real. They could all be saying it and be wrong. But it's not a logical fallacy when you have a coherent explanation as to why the consensus view of a group of experts is actually reliable. So appeal to authority and appeal to scientific consensus are not exactly the same thing. Climate change skeptics and conspiracy theorists love saying, who cares what the experts say? It's an appeal to authority, and authorities are sometimes wrong. But you've got to think about it in a logical arguments format. There's a scientific consensus about climate change, so climate change is true. That is an appeal to authority if that's the full extent of the argument. But that's not the argument, right? The reality is there's a scientific consensus about climate change among climate scientists. Climate scientists have come to this conclusion on the basis of decades of studying their field and collecting data. The scientific community has both error-correcting mechanisms internally and is known to be conservative in their assessments and not going beyond the data when they make assessments. Therefore, we can be reasonably certain that the consensus of climate scientists represents reality in accordance with all of the data that we have. It doesn't mean scientists are always right, but saying climate change is real because it's what climate scientists say is not the same as saying climate science is fake because that's what my pastor says, right? Those are two very, very different things. And I'm glad you're thinking about it. We've got a great bonus show for you today. Become a member, become a patron. I'll speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.